On today's episode of Locked On Wild, a home run for the Wild over the weekend with the NHL draft. They got Zeev Buium. They got a little more Lauko. We'll talk about everything that transpired ahead of free agency today.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. With the playoffs done, the sports just aren't sportsing the way that we like them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking all customers up with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we recap a busy draft for the Minnesota Wild. We'll take a look at the events that transpired that led Zeev Buium to their doorstep and why Philly just dropped the ball. We'll also talk about the intriguing trade for Jakub Lauko that will factor into a potential roster spot for the Wild. And we'll take a look at free agency, which starts today. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, joined on this Monday edition of the show by Alex Micheletti. And Alex, we had a chance to take the draft in at the SodaPod draft stream, which was a ton of fun. But even more so, how about the reaction? And it's on Twitter, the reaction of everybody as that unfolded. And Michael Russo talked about this over the weekend too. This may be the most united the Minnesota Wild fan base has ever been about a first round pick. And it's because it's one that nobody anticipated being available. Nobody had Zeev Buium being there at 12 or 13 for the Wild to select. But that's how it played out in this edition of the draft. And so the Wild get a guy they just had no idea was going to be there. And it's going to benefit them in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, we see all these mock drafts and how we think things are going to fall and that these defensemen were going to go early. And then it kind of flipped and the forwards were getting drafted, first. And so that really helped the Wild. And then, some teams decided to go with other defensemen. And then the dream became a possibility, right when it got to that 12th pick. And the reaction was just the grin on Bill Guerin's face. I'll never forget too.
Yeah.
That made it all for sure. And it was really cool. This is a guy that I wanted all year, and for it to see it come true was really cool. So I'm so happy, and the reaction was priceless from everybody.
And following it as it happens was just unreal, because the moment Beckett Seneca went to the Anaheim Ducks at 3, you're like, okay, this, and it is crazy too, because I didn't even think that was a possibility until it was tweeted the day of. Like, this is how it looks like the top 3 picks are going to go. I'm like, all right, that's a curveball. And then you have Columbus goes with Caden Lindstrom. That pushes Ivan Demidov to 5. Then Utah pulls the curveball, because this was about the spot that Buium was mocked pretty much every time, was Utah at 6. And they go Tijia Ginla. And so at that point you're like, okay. Then you have Yakimchuk drop off the board at 7 to the Senators. That again was a surprise. Berkeley Catton to Seattle. little bit of a surprise. Zane Park to Calgary, Anton Salayev to the Devils, then Sam Dickinson to the San Jose Sharks. And at that point, Bill Guerin said, all right, let's go get our guy. And it's really interesting because you have the reaction from the Flyers. At that point, Danny Briere said this: I think Zeev Buium is going to be a great player, and he's someone we considered strongly, but with Cam York, Jamie Drysdale, and Emil Andre at some point, it gets tough to go with the smaller guy, but he's a fantastic player. Alex, I'm looking at the roster for the Flyers. They have on the books for a while Travis Sanheim, who's 6'4". They have Nick Seeler, who is 6'3". Is it really that they just didn't want to go? I don't think the size makes. I don't think the size makes enough of a difference to pass it. I think Philly just bumbled this.
Yeah, well, watch him play. It I mean, his size does not affect how he plays, and he had 50 plus points as a freshman defenseman, one of the youngest defensemen in all of college hockey. And they're playing, college hockey. There's some older guys in college hockey, 24, 25, and they're physical, and it did not affect him at all, the way he played and the way he skates. So it just seems like Philly, if you're a prospect, it just seems like it's kind of chaos there right now. And, eventually if you're going to play for John Tortorella, it's not fun. Ask Bobby Brink. Bobby Brink was up and down, and, he was healthy scratched here in Minnesota, where he's from, when the Flyers played against the Wild. So you can be messed around with a lot with Philly, but you always take the best player available. And, look what happened with the Wild when the book is not closed on Charlie Stramel, but look what happens when you just go off not best player available and just think what you think is a need, and then panic. And so it's the Wild's game though, and I cannot wait for a Faber Buium pairing for the next decade. It's going to be magical, and both those guys can run a power play. And so, I mean, you can be set for a while, which is just so ideal. And another thing is, he's from California, and I for sure thought one of the California teams would take him. I mean, there was a lot of talk earlier that day of the draft that he might have been going 3, and then all of a sudden it switched. Thank goodness Dickinson went to San Jose, because that was another team that I for sure thought would take a look at him.
And I'm looking at their roster too, and I completely forgot about another guy who is on IR. They have Rasmus Ristolainen, who's 6'4". Like, politely, you have size. Like,
right.
You have size defensively.
And another thing, you can always get rid of some of those guys that you already have.
Yep, exactly.
Like Cam York is nothing special, and Drysdale, all he does is get hurt. Literally, all he does is he got hurt in Anaheim, and then he got hurt in Philly when he got right to Philly. And when he gets hurt, it's not just a few games; it's season ending. And so that when you have that injury history, you don't just magically get just healthier as you get older. And when you're already having major health issues early in your career, it's not good.
And so then the Flyers took Jet Luchenko, who is 5'11". And so I don't know. This just like,
and it was a reach too, and a guy that is nowhere near ready, or not going to be ready for a long, long, long time. And in the first round, you're hoping, for someone that's not that big of a project. So that And
like,
it shows the inexperience from Danny Briere, and which is too bad because he was a heck of a player, but maybe it's going to take some growing pains as a front office guy.
like take Consta Hellenius at that spot if you're looking
Right.
at a center. Like,
Right.
I and I saw people suggest too that that Buium has the same agent as Cutter Gauthier,
Mhm.
which could have played in as well, but I can't see there being any scenario that doesn't involve the Flyers just completely botching this.
If you can't have a good relationship with agents, I mean,
Yeah,
you're not going to be a GM in the
that's a
league for
that's a great
for a
point
while.
too. Like it just I'm just trying to make excuses for the Flyers. Like
Right.
they just dropped the ball here.
Yeah,
Like
it's
that's
hey, and you know who's still there? Who I thought got fired with Chuck, Brent Flair. I don't know how he kept his job
oh
because Chuck got fired, and that was his right hand man. And when I saw his face, I was like, I looked at you too when we were at the draft stream. I was like, how is he still employed? That was interesting.
Yikes. We are going to have an episode later today. I know I had a couple of people in the comments that were looking for maybe a full breakdown on all of these players. We got one coming up for you later today. But I did want to talk because the Wild made when so depending on who you ask, the Wild got 3 players that were rated in the top 25 at one point in the draft. They got Zeev Buium, they got Ryder Ritchie, and then the defenseman that they got as well with their 4th round pick, Kiviharju, was rated, I think, 25th.
How about that? How about that kid telling Bill Guerin, you just got the steal of the draft?
Yeah.
That's a heck of a way to introduce yourself to your new boss. Bill Guerin's reaction, he loved it.
I about drove off the road when I heard that because that's the kind of that's the kind of confidence stuff that I really like. But in addition to that pick, the Wild traded Vinny Lettieri, and they brought in a guy whose last name is literally Lauko. And so we're going to talk about how the Wild got a little crazier during the draft, in addition to just nailing it. That's all coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, you know me. I love sports. I love them so much that I just want all of the seasons to continue all year long. But now that the Stanley Cup playoffs are done, the NBA playoffs are done, it's going to be a little bit before football gets going. It's Major League Baseball or bust. And depending on where you live, you may not be able to watch them. So for me, the sports just aren't sportsing the way that I like them to. That's where FanDuel comes in, because FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you get the itch. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. That's FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. If you missed it, make sure to check out yesterday's live stream. Jack Carlson joined us. It was phenomenal. Just a great hour of stories about the North Stars days, and it was so much fun. I encourage you, and what I'm probably going to do, since we got 4th of July coming up, I will be cutting that up into an actual episode for those that missed it. But I encourage you, if you didn't get a chance to see it live, that's an hour. That's an hour that you are going to want to take a look at. So make sure to check that out from yesterday. Just A+++, much like the much like the draft for the Minnesota Wild. And again, we've got an episode coming later today that will break down all the picks in full, what we like, and we'll try to look at maybe a little timetable for when we can expect to see some of these guys at the NHL level. But Alex, I wanted to talk about Jakub Lauko, who was acquired from the Boston Bruins. And Lauko is 24. He's 6 foot, 196. He played in 60 games last year, 2 goals, 8 assists. He had 32 PIMs, which as you told me before we started recording, a few fights against a couple of the Minnesota Wild fighters. But here's the thing that I like. He had 176 hits. 176 hits in 60 games. He's not afraid to throw his body around. Just 8 giveaways in 60 games. So he's smart with the puck too. And he's 24 years old. Like, you figured that there was going to be a move made at some point to add somebody that could play on that fourth line, because Mason Shaw is not going to be back. Vinny Lettieri was obviously traded. Jake Lucchini, I would be highly surprised if he returns too. So that there's a full makeover going on that fourth line. And not only is Lauko going to factor into that equation, you've got Graeme Clarke, you've got you got a couple of these other guys that got signed to qualifying offers. I mean, Sammy Walker got given a qualifying offer, which I thought was kind of a surprise.
Right.
But the thing is you've got options, and not only those guys, but like, you got options. If Riley Heidt were to make the team, you've got a roster spot available for him. And so it's looking like there are going to be some spots available for guys to go out and win roster spots through training camp and into the start of the regular season, which after a 30-game span from that fourth line, in which I don't think any player on that line registered a point for 30 games, I'm okay with it.
Well, a lot of the guys that you named off too that were on the fourth line this past season, they aren't really typical fourth line, player, like the role that you want a fourth liner to be. And this guy is it. Like you mentioned the stats on the hitting, and it's getting back to the identity that Bill Guerin wants. He talked about it when reporters were asking him about this trade, and it's getting back to the identity that the Wild want. And this guy is an absolute character too. I don't know if you saw it, but I reposted his tweet when he got hit. A skate blade hit him in the face last season. It was crazy injury, and he's absolutely hilarious on Twitter. And he posted a picture of an orc from Lord of the Rings, and it just made me absolutely, he said he woke up, looking beautiful, and it was just, classic. I think this guy is going to be a fan favorite, and probably better chance at playing a full 82 in Minnesota compared to Boston. So this is I think Boston was doing him right by giving him a fresh start somewhere else. And 24, he's not 35, 36. So he's not Patrick Maroon or Ryan Reeves. So this is perfect. He's still young enough, and he'll play his role, exactly how a fourth liner should be.
Yeah, and now all of a sudden, I would imagine at this point, you're looking at Freddie Gaudreau as your fourth line center. Mm-hmm. You're looking at now Jakub Lauko as one of the wings on that fourth line. But those are those are guys that have played at the NHL level. Like, I know Gaudreau is coming off of just a terrible season, and he's either going to get back on track, or I'm just going to say this right now. If this continues for him, he is either going to be bought out or sent elsewhere. Like, the patience runs really thin with guys that just, especially to a guy who is signed to that length of a deal. Teams aren't going to teams aren't going to sit through that and wait for you to figure it out. If he goes through and has a similar stretch where he's not producing this year, that'll be it. That'll be the end of the line.
Even if he's not producing offensively, you have to be responsible defensively, and he wasn't even doing that last season. Yeah. So when you can't do anything right, it's a bad look. And the only reason why he got that deal is because of Dean Evison. Let's be real. So he has a lot to be, without Dean Evison, he wouldn't be in the NHL right now.
Let's go through just before we talk about free agency a little bit. The qualifying offers that were either handed out or not. The Wilds made qualifying offers to Graeme Clarke, Adam Raska, Sammy Walker, and Declan Chisholm. They did not make qualifying offers to Sam Hentges. Dmitry,
I don't even think he's playing hockey anymore.
He was on IR the whole season, so that one doesn't surprise me. Dmitry Ovchinnikov, that one, little bit of a surprise. Mason Shaw, not at all. That, like, the writing was on the wall for that. Simon Johansson, he 24 years old, and it just was
a failed
not
draft pick. He's
just
probably going to go back overseas.
And Hunter Jones. Hunter Jones, I think, is going to hopefully benefit from a change of scenery because his numbers were not good.
I think he might retire from hockey too. Okay. I think he was having personal issues, and so I think it might be the end of the road for him with hockey,
which is too bad.
Right.
Of the four that they did, are you as surprised as I am that Sammy Walker got a qualifying offer?
Yeah, it seems like he's getting the Kyle Rau kind of treatment where it's you might be too good for the AHL but not good enough for the NHL, so you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, and just looking at the situation too, I would say if you're looking at forwards like that are going to potentially get called up for injury replacements, I think Graeme Clarke probably gets the first shot.
Well, he's getting passed up. Sammy Walker was, there was other guys that were getting, when you can't beat out Jake Lucchini for a spot,
that's not great.
That tells you where the organization thinks you are.
And even Adam Raska too, geez, if the Wild wanted to go a particular route, he could end up being, you put him and Lauko on the fourth line together.
Just maniacs out there.
That's chaotic.
Right.
That's chaotic. But again, we talked about this last year, that the Wild just did not have enough options. They didn't have enough quality options to be able to step in and fill roles, and they didn't do well in Iowa.
And let's be real too, Ogren and Husandinov, as good as they looked in a short sample size, they aren't guaranteed roster spots. They can be sent to Iowa, and so if the Wild do sign some guys, that they think are NHL quality, they can put some of these young guys still in Iowa, and it's okay, but of course we would like them to make the team, but if that's what the Wild want to do is sign a couple more free agents, I don't think the fan base would be upset. Because both of those guys are still so young in their careers. So it's not a bad thing if they don't make the team.
I just have one name on my list that is a no. And we'll talk about that here in a second because free agency has already begun.
It's been a banger already. It's even though guys can't officially sign right now, but the things that are coming out, it's just crazy. And some of these guys that we have watched for a long time with teams that are gonna go away from the team, that they made a name for themselves, like Marchessault leaving Vegas and Stamkos leaving Tampa Bay. It's going to be weird seeing some of these guys in different uniforms for sure.
Yes, it is. There are some major area codes that are being changed. We'll talk free agency as well as potential options for the Minnesota Wilds if they want to spend a little dough. That's on the way as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. One final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. And once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We've got content for you all week. Yes, even though 4th of July is on Thursday, we got plenty to go over this week. We're going to take a look at the draft picks later today. I also want to now go through and rank the top 10 prospects in the Minnesota Wild farm system myself. Like, I want to put a list together, kind of how I see it and where Mr. Buium fits in that whole thing, because I will tell you, near the top already, so that's exciting. So be on the lookout for that. We'll crunch the Jack Carlson interview into an episode for you later this week as well, because I know how this works. There are going to be people going to the cabin, up to the lake, time in the car, and so you either can listen to the radio or you can pop on an episode of Locked On Wild and listen in the car on your way to wherever you're headed. So we got you covered.
I'll be doing that.
I will. I'll have a few. I'll have a few in the hopper for you. Don't worry. We'll have plenty for you to tune into as you make your way to your 4th of July location. But Alex, we won't be seeing a same or a similar level of 4th of July fireworks for the Minnesota Wild this season in free agency because limited funds and all, and Jakub Lauko being added to the mix, that pushed the Wild to, I think, $5.9 million in cap space. Now, there's an easy way to free up more of that if the Wild want to go that route, although I'm surprised at how quiet all of that Philip Gustafsson discussion got. Gustafsson and Marco Rossi both. It just seems like the ideal offer for both never materialized. And so whether they're on the team, I'd prefer that they were. If the Wild did want to free up more cap space, Gustafsson's a way to do that. So $5.9 million in money to spend for free agency. And, you know, the name that has been most commonly linked to the Wilds is David Perron. And look, I can understand the logic. It just does nothing for me. Like, he's 36. Yes, he has torched the Wild over the course of his career. He had 17 goals this past season. He played a full 82 last year, had 24 goals for Detroit. You know, he's been part of a couple of deep playoff runs. He was with the St. Louis Blues when they won the Cup. I get it, but I just would much rather see one of the prospects, one of the young players, kind of win that spot, that second line spot that we're talking about. I would just much rather see one of those guys win that spot as opposed to have another vet that comes in and potentially underperforms.
Well, yeah, that would be ideal. And then we also I thought this was, you know, just like a rumor, you know, not even a rumor, but like, you know, just a thought. But we heard that there's major interest in Patrik Laine, which I was like, oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. But they are really exploring this option once he is officially out of the player assistance program. You know, then it can, you know, then it can be a reality for teams. If they were to do that, you would think that they would have to move Gus to create even more space because you'd have to ask Columbus also to eat half his contract too, to get it down to, the 4 range. But, I don't know. That guy always torched the Wild, but he's also has some major issues. But if they're looking for scoring, that's a guy that can score in bunches too, but you don't know where he's at his game right now. So that just seeing that was like opened my eyes. I was like, wow, I can't believe they're doing their due diligence on that. Another guy that has always done well against the Wild too, and he's still under 30, is Anthony Duclair, who I think they could get a little bit cheaper. But no, I'm with you. It would be awesome to see Riley Heidt, make the team and get some of those minutes. But I was just wanted to throw out those other options that are like holy buckets.
Yeah, it's to the point that it has now been mentioned. Russo mentioned it as kind of his free agent primer, as he said, or as he called it. Laine is the first option on the table there. A couple of the other names that were thrown in as potential options: David Perron. And okay, I should have. I'll say this. I'll say this on the Perron front. If it's a 1 year deal for Perron, that's going to anger me less. It is again just a if they go 3-year deal for Perron, I'm gonna be irate.
I know he's won a cup, but I was having this conversation with my dad yesterday, and we were talking. Does he think the Wild are Stanley Cup contenders?
Yeah.
I mean, you think at this stage in his career that he would like to try to get another cup. I don't think he's just chasing money. I think
I'd rather he go to Vegas.
Right, go back. They have the room now without Marchessault. So that's a lot of money that they were trying to, but they didn't fully give to him. But there's money for Vegas now, and it seems like they're throwing their hat in the ring for Stamkos too, which is just, it's going to be insane. Crazy. Yeah. Free agency the first day is going to be insane.
Yeah. There's going to be a ton of movements.
You're saying the no state income tax teams saying like, hey, we're open for business. Nashville's big game hunting. They're throwing in their hat in the ring for Brady Shea, another Minnesota kid. And yeah, how about the buyouts too? I wanted to talk to you about that. Holy buckets. It's, you've seen all these buyouts. It's GMs admitting they made some horrible decisions. And a lot of these were made on July 1st. So you gotta be buyers beware sometimes, but Jack Campbell going, Edmonton finally pulled the plug. I felt bad for Nate Schmidt, another Minnesota kid. It just didn't, going from Vegas to Winnipeg, talk about opposite, just weather and everything is completely different. And it wouldn't surprise me to see, if he goes back to Vegas, because he was so beloved there. And I couldn't believe that. And how about Adam Boqvist? When I looked up his age, I was like, how is he only still 23? He got bought and he got out that young. Crazy. But Columbus is trying to, that's why they're going to try to get rid of Laine. They're just trying to have a clean slate,
trying to retool again. They're trying to reboot for the 50th time in a row.
Yeah, I know it's a tough place for free agents to go to. I still don't get, Johnny Hockey took less money to go there when he could have stayed in Calgary, but who knows? It's going to be so fascinating to see, because a lot of these guys, are rumored to go in the Central Division too, which it's like not good for the Wild. And we're already seeing Tyler Bertuzzi, who's a pain in the butt to play against, going to Chicago most likely today. So and I was talking to somebody on Twitter too. I was like, it's really cool to see some of these, franchises, even though they're in the Wild's division, that they're going to spend money instead of just being at, right above the cap floor. They're trying to spend money. You look at what Utah, I almost call them Arizona. You look at what Utah did, getting Sergachev from Tampa Bay. I was like, that was the biggest bomb in the draft. That was something by Bill Armstrong.
Hey, Philly, that's how you build a decor.
Right.
I love what Utah did to go from literally no signed players on their roster to having a top 4 that is, I think, 24, 25, 26, 27.
Yeah, Bill Armstrong just did not sleep. He got, he got Jersey extended. He got Villamaki extended, traded for Marino too from Jersey. I mean, he was firing on all cylinders.
Those Red Bulls hit.
Bulls hit. I saw that tweet too, and I quote tweeted it. How about some of the GMs just not leaving Vegas? They're going to just remotely do free agency from Vegas. I was like, looks like they just didn't want the fun to stop there.
Honestly, I would be fine with the NHL doing that every year.
Yeah.
Like, I know they're kind of going away from the in-person drafts. Make it a big event. Like,
the
make
Sphere
it kind
was
of
awesome. Those graphics and everything. They should just do it at the Sphere every year. It's owned by Jim Dolan, who's the Rangers and owner. It's his place. Why not continue to do it? And, he gets use out of it. So I'd be all for that.
Make it the kickoff to the off season. Like, make it your pinnacle event. And then that way next year when the NBA draft isn't at basically the exact same time, then Bill Guerin can invite Tim Connolly and Kwesi and Derek Falvey to help him out and say, boy, Judd Brackett he's just a machine. Just a machine with those draft picks.
Well, how about this? We don't see this too often. The Timberwolves and the Wild being winners of drafts at the same time. So that was incredible to see the love from the media saying the Timberwolves just did an amazing job, and so did the Wild. So that was really cool.
I felt really good, and I talked about this. I think I talked about this on the stream, and also just kind of in thoughts after. It was great to see things play out for the Wild, like in a really good way, for once, to where you're not like, oh, it's a 13 player draft and the Wild draft 14th, that kind of a thing. Like they and you'll hear more about this in our second episode coming later today. They nailed it. Like, and they were fortunate that Philly blundered to where they were able to get Buium, and now we're having to try to hear Philly backpedal for why they didn't mess it up. That was just really good to see.
And another thing in this draft, what they took advantage of is some of the guys that they drafted were injured this year. And so it made their stock fall a little bit, but they got amazing value on a lot of these kids. This Ryder Ritchie, his dad played in the NHL. Just watching him in his hands and the way he shoots the puck, I mean, he looks like a complete steal. When they talk to him, it looks like he's 11 years old, but he looks like a really good hockey player. So I was really. Judd Brackett in these second round picks, he continues to hit. They should just make trades to get just all the second round picks that they can get, because that man, for some reason, that round he just continues to hit.
Well, they have the ammo in 2026 to do it for next year. 2/3, 2/4, 2/5, 2/6. Maybe they get a couple more. We'll see. But it was a fun weekend, and it'll be a frenzy today. Wild probably won't be super active, but I would imagine they'll do something to try to fill it's very clear that they want to upgrade over the they want to upgrade over the cardboard cutout of Marcus Johansson that was marked present during the entirety of the season. And
Yeah.
I'm
should
all
be
in favor of that.
There should be a for sale sign, in that second line. They should go to all these agents that, hey, you want a 1-year deal, prove it year, for top 6 minutes, here you go. And, if you have an amazing season, you can go elsewhere, pull a Matt Duchene. And that's what got me intrigued by Jeff Skinner. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. But it's gonna be fascinating. And I think one more thing that we have to address too is Iowa was just god awful, and so I think Bill Guerin's gonna try to get a couple two-way guys and maybe some veteran type guys that can help that team, because they just seemed like a complete mess, guys, just no confidence. And so I think they'll try to get some more Matt Hendricks will help with that, try to get some more veteran presence down there for sure.
Yeah, I would think that should be a priority, is just trying to kind of get Iowa on track and funnel that up to the Minnesota, funnel that up all the way to the NHL. So we'll see what happens. Of course, we'll have you covered, and make sure to stay tuned for a full breakdown on all 6 Minnesota Wild draft selections coming up later today. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode, as well as hit the subscribe button. I've got some exciting news that we will be sharing here, hopefully before too long. And so make sure that you don't miss out on any of that, because we got some fun stuff in the pipeline that's going to be coming up here soon. So make sure to tune in and subscribe on your favorite platforms throughout the week, because we have you covered every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.